Principal Fernando Hernandez used to watch the playground at his San Diego school, Perkins K-8, and see something remarkable. He saw his regular Mexican-American students actively changing their slang, shifting their words so the new kids, the ones just arriving from Venezuela, Colombia, and Peru, many living in a camp in a nearby park, could fit in, could be understood. His staff had become experts at supporting kids facing extreme adversity. But this school year, the playground is quieter. The new arrivals just stopped. So far, Hernandez hasn't enrolled a single newcomer student, not one. The desks they would have filled are empty, and it's not just his school. That story is such a clear signal that a massive demographic and societal shift is underway across the U.S. Today, we are diving deep into the cascading effects of declining immigrant student enrollment and the departure of immigrant families moving far beyond the classroom door.
And we really have to look into the economic and, the psychological landscape of the country. What's crucial to grasp right away is just the scale of this. This isn't one city or one state. It's visible nationwide, from Miami-Dade all the way to San Diego, and even in smaller towns like Albertville, Alabama.
And it seems to be driven by a mix of things, right? Deportations, people leaving voluntarily out of fear, and then just a sharp drop in new arrivals.
That's right. And when you look at all the sources, the consequences really seem to land in three major interwoven areas.
Okay, what are they?
First, you have this immediate economic shock. Then there's the massive psychological harm to children. And finally, you see this slow weakening of community cohesion. That's what we need to trace today.
So let's start with that first one, the most immediate and tangible effect, the direct financial hit to public schools, and then the shock to the labor market.
It's a great place to start. And we see this really strange paradox in a place like Albertville, Alabama.
Right. You mentioned them. Their local economy is actually growing. They're getting their first Target store, which is a big deal. But the school superintendent is planning for deep cuts. How does that happen?
Well, that paradox is the perfect illustration. Public school funding, it relies almost entirely on student counts, either daily attendance or just total enrollment.
So when immigrant families, who are often the source of enrollment growth in a lot of districts, suddenly leave or just stop coming,
The funding stream reverses.
Yeah.
Instantly.
And looking at the high volume districts, the numbers are, they're dizzying. You take Miami-Dade County Public Schools, they saw newcomer enrollment just plummet.
It went from over 20,000 students down to just 2,550 this school year.
And that one drop wiped out about $70 million from the district's budget.
$70 million.
Yeah.
That is a sudden, massive hole that has to be absorbed. And you have to think about what that money pays for. It's not just, pencils and books.
No, it's the specialized programs, the English language instructors, the social emotional support services, the very things you need to help these kids succeed.
Exactly. And you're already seeing it hit staffing. In Albertville, where 60% of the students are Hispanic, the Newcomer Academy hasn't enrolled a single new student.
Not one.
So the superintendent expects to cut around 12 teacher positions, 12 educators gone just because the desks are empty.
And this gets even worse depending on how a state funds its schools, doesn't it?
It does. States like California and Texas, which have huge immigrant populations, they use attendance-based models.
So if a kid is just absent for a while because the family is scared, even if they haven't left for good,
the school still loses funding. The fear of enforcement translates directly onto the school's budget spreadsheet.
And this shockwave, it doesn't just stop at the schoolhouse door, it rolls right into the labor market.
Immediately. We have preliminary Census Bureau data showing that more than 1.2 million immigrants disappeared from the labor force.
And that's just from January through July, in just a few months.
1.2 million people. To put that in perspective, that's a truly colossal number. It essentially wipes out any job growth you might have expected for that period.
Because this group makes up, nearly 20% of the whole U.S. workforce?
And critically, they normally contribute at least 50% of all job growth in a given year. So you take them out and the engine just stalls.
And if you look at the specific sectors that are getting squeezed, it becomes so clear these are foundational industries.
Absolutely. 45% of workers in farming, fishing, and forestry are immigrants. 30% of construction workers. 43% of home healthcare aides.
So if those workers disappear, the whole service pyramid just kind of collapses.
And we're seeing it happen in real time. In agriculture, enforcement actions have caused these costly delays and waste right during peak harvest.
I read about the watermelon and cantaloupe season.
Exactly. Farmers just can't find the labor.
Yeah.
And that leads directly to less domestic production. You and I are already paying more for this at the grocery store.
Construction seems to be getting hammered, too, especially in those border areas. The reports from McAllen, Texas, say construction sites are completely dead.
And it's even more dramatic in California. The Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario area, a huge economic engine, lost 7,200 construction jobs. There's the largest loss anywhere in the nation.
And this is where we have to dig into the economics of it, right? Because when you remove these workers, you're not just opening up jobs for someone else.
No, that's the key misunderstanding. You often eliminate the jobs that rely on that labor. Think about a construction foreman or an architect or the person who supplies the equipment.
Their jobs disappear when there's no crew to build the foundation.
It's a cascading failure, and we've seen this before. Studies on past deportations between 2008 and 2015, they show that deportations actually reduced the employment share of U.S.-born workers.
And lowered their wages.
So when we project this forward, the implications are staggering. We're talking about a potential reduction in U.S. GDP of anywhere from $711 billion to $1.7 trillion.
$1.7 trillion. It's like wiping the entire economy of a medium-sized country off the U.S. balance sheet.
That's how interwoven this all is.
So that's the economic picture. But we have to shift now to the human cost, the devastating long-term psychological crisis for these kids.
Absolutely. We have to look at this through the lens of developmental science. Researchers have actually identified the chronic fear of arrest, of parental separation, as a specific source of toxic stress.
They've classified it as an adverse childhood experience, or an ACE.
Exactly. And we need to underline why that's so important. And ACE isn't just, temporary stress. This is trauma that can cause disrupted brain development, behavioral issues, even PTSD.
It's a profound threat. And parental separation, it does more than just break a child's heart.
It creates this whole cascade of secondary harms: economic instability, social disruption, huge strain on the family that's left.
You see it when a father is deported and the mother has to become a single parent, working longer hours, which means less time with the kids.
Right. And then older kids are often forced into becoming caregivers for their younger siblings. That directly hurts their own education, their own development.
And the long-term data is it's heartbreaking. Adolescents who've had a loved one detained or deported show much higher rates of suicidal ideation, substance use, and depression.
And that fear, it just permeates everything. It shows up as this widespread isolation. It's not just in their heads. They physically avoid institutions.
Which the schools see immediately. Chronic absenteeism. Enrollment drops.
We have reports that after news of IC activity near Boston, over 1,000 students just didn't show up to school the next day. A Chicago educator saw attendance drop by almost 50%.
And that fear also means parents avoid getting essential services, right? They won't go to the hospital or to clinics.
They won't go to parent-teacher conferences. They're trying to become invisible to prevent drawing government attention. And in the process, they're sacrificing their family's health and well-being.
You hear stories like the one about Natasha, a Venezuelan parent in California. She still sends her kids to school. But every afternoon, she's scanning the road behind her car, terrified she's being followed.
That constant vigilance, that is the physical manifestation of toxic stress. It's the background hum of trauma.
So we've covered the money and the psychological cost. That brings us to the third area, which is this quiet but profound erosion of community life.
And you see it in the sheer scale of the enrollment drop in places that are used to a high influx. Houston, for example, had to close its Las Americas newcomer school.
Because enrollment just fell off a cliff, from 111 students down to 21.
And that school serves such a vital role. Its closure says everything about the missing population.
And then there's Chelsea, Massachusetts, a city that's long been known as a haven for immigrants. Newcomer enrollment there dropped from almost 600 to just 152 over the summer.
And a quarter of those students aren't just moving somewhere else in the U.S., they're going back to their home countries.
The director of the Parent Center there said, "You can feel the fear in the air." She attributed it to masked IC officers patrolling the streets.
And that quietness is a social fabric frame. Principal Hernandez in San Diego worries that those empty desks mean the kids who are still there are losing chances to socialize, to learn empathy.
He compares it to the isolation of the pandemic.
But this time it's driven by fear. And that fear creates this deep mistrust in public institutions. People become less likely to call the police, less likely to go to the doctor, less likely to participate in schools or churches. They just isolate.
Which also forces industries to make these incredibly rapid and really difficult adaptations.
Especially agriculture. They're facing the most immediate labor shortage, so they have no choice but to pour money into technology and automation.
Robots to pick strawberries.
Right. Which is incredibly slow and expensive to develop. And in the short term, a machine is just not a perfect substitute for a human hand, so you see a real drop in domestic production of fruits and vegetables.
So farmers are relying more on the H-2A guest worker program?
They are. It's expected to exceed 400,000 workers next year. But that program is so expensive, you have to pay for housing, transportation, certification, that it's really inaccessible for smaller family-run farms.
So what you're describing is a huge structural change in American agriculture, really. It favors massive corporate farms that can afford the robots and the H-2A program.
And it slowly pushes the smaller operations out of the market entirely. The whole landscape of how we produce our food is being restructured by this one demographic shift.
So what we've really explored today shows that these policy choices, they have ripple effects far beyond what you'd see on a budget sheet or a policy summary.
Exactly. The economic impact on schools and the labor force is immediate, and you can measure it.
But the psychological toll on millions of children, and we have to remember many of them are U.S. citizens, that's a deep, long-term developmental crisis we'll be dealing with for decades.
It's a profound disruption. It touches every single aspect of American society, from those multi-trillion-dollar GDP estimates and the food on our tables, all the way down to the quiet playgrounds and the empty desks in our local schools. The departure of these families changes the very foundation of communities and our workforce, forcing really rapid and complex adaptations across the entire country.